Okay, welcome to open session for the regular board meeting, March 9th, 2021. The board met earlier in closed session and took two reportable actions. The board voted 4-1, Collins dissenting, to reject the liability claim student versus PAUSD GC 2021.01. The board also voted 4-1, Collins dissenting, to issue a notice of non-re-election to a probationary certified employee identified by employee number 806895 of the 2020-2021 school year, and directed the superintendent or designee to send out appropriate legal notices. All right, before we move on, a bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to comment on an item, you can do so by going to www.pausd.org/comments and filling out a virtual comment card. Once you fill that card out, we'll go ahead and call your name and unmute you so you can speak. As you can see, we are now holding our meetings in person to the extent board members are able or would like to do that. And so we are here in person today, and we're observing social distancing and mask wearing, but our Zoom protocol will be the same. The executive order is still in effect permitting virtual meetings. And so until that is out of effect, we'll be continuing our virtual meeting protocols. All right, the next item is the approval of the agenda order. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the agenda order as presented.
Second.
All right, so moved by Ms. DeBrienza, seconded by Ms. Ladimirak. Dr. Austin, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Ms. Atla,
Aye.
Ms. Ladimirak,
Aye.
Ms. DeBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Drop.
Aye. All right, the agenda order is passed, and let's move on to reports. Dr. Austin?
All right. First of all, for our group here with us and those watching at home, I had a reoccurrence of a back injury. So at some point in the meeting, if you hear me yell out, I'm not angry, but I mean, I'm in a spasm and I may be walking around a little bit during the meeting too. So I don't want anyone to think that that's disrespectful. I'm just going to be up and down a little bit tonight. Wow, one of our team members here today just said we celebrated today our 10th first day of school. So for each group, right? Think about that. If you go all the way back to bringing back our post-secondary futures program at Coverly, that was one of our major milestone kickoffs. And just going through this, 7 through 12 came back today, at least the first group that was allowed to, their designated days. 6th grade has been back a week today. Just found out that right now we currently have 12 elementary school cohorts that are back for 5 days a week instruction because their numbers allowed that for spacing and they had a willing teacher. And by the end of this month, we will have 20 cohorts open for 5 days a week. So that is some quality work. I'd like to thank our teachers for raising their hands and saying that they were willing to do those. Those are all voluntary assignments, means that in each case, teachers volunteered to do that. And they also met the conditions to be allowed. And I'd like to thank Ann Brown for her leadership in getting these classes back and going all the way back to our very first reopenings, and all the work that you did for us there as well. Funny story, I was able to see both of our board reps face to face for the first time on campus visits, but as Ms. Adla reminded me, I didn't know who she was. So she was accurate in that. Now, to be fair, she was wearing a mask and a giant green wig and spirit gear. So it wasn't exactly the way I had imagined seeing her. I can see her smiling now. And Mr. Atla, or Mr. Lee, I was able to pick him out. So I saw him walking across. I said, I know that guy. So it's great to get to see some people face to face. We have held our first meeting with PAEA, already talking now about reopening in the fall. So that's something we're going to do, walking together. And we have our first meeting with CSEA on the same topic this Friday. Additionally, we're hosting a virtual job fair March 16th. We're hosting our own, again, virtual. There'll be a lot of information out on that, but if you know people that may be interested and joining our team. We'd sure like to meet him. And then finally, we have an update about some COVID testing that does not relate to the agendized item later. This is a completely separate item. I asked Ms. Conaway just to give a quick update.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. So we are very, very pleased to announce and confirm that we will be offering a COVID vaccination clinic for all of our employees, both insured and uninsured, with a partnership through the Safeway Pharmacy. So we just confirmed all of the details and all of our staff received the registration links to sign up. So our hope is to catch every individual who has not yet had their dose 1. And with any doses that are left over, we will be providing those doses to those waitlisted who need dose 2. So we hope to capture most of our staff with this particular clinic. So the clinic is on March the 20th, and the second clinic follow-up for dose 2 is on April the 10th. So we are looking very much forward to providing this support to our staff.
Ms. Conaway, thank you for that and for arranging that for us. And just finally, thanks to our governor who released vaccinations just for teachers and employees of schools to our county, and in that release prioritized our school district specifically. So all employees in this district had the opportunity to receive their first vaccination shot this last week, but we're still trying to make sure everyone who wants that vaccination can get it, and appreciate everyone's efforts. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Austin. Before we move to our student board reports, we do have one public comment on the closed session items. And apologies for the technical issues, but let's go ahead and take that now. That is Arya Sufiani.
Sorry, that was a mistake. It was for a non-agenda item.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
we'll go ahead and call on you in open session, open forum. All right, student board reports. Mr. Lee?
Okay, I'll start. So obviously the big thing is welcoming students back on campus. So as Dr. Austin mentioned, we welcome back our first cohort that's last name starting with A to K back on campus today, and then M or L through Z will be on campus for Thursday and Friday. So to that end, SEC has been preparing a lot of stuff to welcome students back. Over the weekend, we drew chalk art all over campus, although the rain's probably washed it away by now. So, oh well. We also made banners all over campus. So those are hung up as well. Streamers, balloons, the whole deal, just to get students excited to come back on campus. We also made an orientation video to help students understand the guidelines and the procedures for coming back on campus. So that starts with what to do at home with filling out the health screener, all the way to what to do when you're leaving campus. So we have that out. And hopefully students are using that as a good resource. And at the same time, over the past week, we've had picture day for all the students to get their ID pictures taken, and yearbook also has silly seniors to help seniors get silly pictures to put in the yearbook. So that's pretty exciting. It's also March. That's usually a pretty busy month for us at SEC. So there's a lot of events going on. Tomorrow during Gun Together, we will have the Danish artist Jeppe Hahn come speak to us. So that's pretty exciting. He's an artist that specializes in like global participatory art. So we're going to be hearing from him, and we'll also have an art exhibit that students can participate in the coming weeks. It's called Breathe With Me. So that's pretty exciting. SEC elections are currently coming along right now. Applications are due tomorrow, and we'll come to know who our new officers are in the coming weeks. Pride Week is starting next week as well. We're also hosting a Women's History Month writing contest. We have a mental health conference on March 22nd. So that students will have the opportunity to hear from speakers and also to join breakout rooms to talk about mental health related topics. Starting March 19th, we will also start the Pally and Gun Career Month. So this is something we do every year where professional industry experts come in to speak with students. So we're pretty excited about that as well. And on a final note, just this past weekend, our speech and debate team at Gun had 5 teams qualified to the state tournament. So that's 10 students. That's pretty exciting as well. And I'll leave it up to Maida right now.
Thank you. So obviously Pally reopened, but I think the one difference is that Pally A through L are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and K through Z are Thursdays, Fridays. Today was my day to go. I unfortunately did not go, but I'll be going tomorrow. We are also in similar lines to Gun, planning on welcoming students back with multitude of events. We started off last week with new student orientation, where we were able to welcome primarily freshmen and as well as transfer students back onto campus and give them an orientation. It was complete with spike ball. The orientation leaders dressed up in Pelly gear, and live bands as well as donuts provided by PTSA. Our theater performances are coming up this weekend and next weekend. Seniors were able to pick up their senior yard signs as well as free boba and a camo mask on February 21st, and we'll have another senior event planned for March 21st. The sports teams are starting to compete again. Our football team has a scrimmage on this Thursday. We're also hosting a banner competition. Tea with Teachers was also an event that was planned for the previous weeks, and the winner was able to take home boba. We have a virtual wellness week coming up in conjunction with the Wellness Center at Pally. And similarly to Gun, AS elections are coming up. We are currently in the process of editing and revising the election packet, and we'll be sending out that information very soon. And like Thomas said, we're also preparing for Career Month, and we're very excited to kick that off. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Capital Advisors Legislative Update.
Okay, it's going to take us just a sec to promote him. He's ready to go. Great. I'd like to introduce Kevin Gordon from Capital Advisors to give us a legislative update for this evening, and then he will be happy to take questions that you may have as well.
Great. Board President, members of the board, it's great to be with you all. It reminds me of the fact, in fact, I don't even know why I did not think of doing this, but it was a year ago, actually, I think it was on St. Patrick's Day, that was the last in-person presentation that Jack O'Connell and I made, either of us have made anywhere in the state in a year. And there you guys are all in the boardroom. I don't know that you're allowing anybody else in, but I probably should have made the trip back for nostalgia's sake. But anyways, it's great to be with you. I want you guys to feel free to interrupt me during my comments as I give you an update. And again, I'm not going to go too long. The governor is in the midst right now of concluding his State of the State address, where I've been listening to the whole thing. And I mean, you know, obviously have respect for the governor, but what it is essentially is it's a listing of all of the accomplishments that he's made this year. And, you know, some acknowledgement of some of the problems that they've had, but, you know, typically what you hear in a State of the State address are usually announcements about new initiatives and that sort of thing. But again, because the legislature has been busy doing some things this year ahead of the State of the State address that's typically given in January every year, he is really ending up backtracking and talking about some of the things that they accomplished. So I don't know that we're going to get much news out of this speech. We typically do, but we probably won't tonight. So needless to say, you're not missing much that you can't certainly make up for later. And I'll probably do a little summary of it for you that I'll send out later. In terms of development statewide, the other thing I've got to say at the top of this is that it has just been such a pleasure representing Palo Alto, because all during the last many months, because again, I haven't been in front of you since a year ago, but over the many months where the education community constantly faces some kind of a dilemma, it's usually born out of a lack of leadership at the state level. And you're left to your own devices to try to figure out the path forward, basically alone. The district, your district, has been, and you guys know this, but I wanted to just say it publicly, has been truly a standout leader amongst districts. And I give presentations like this a lot. I guarantee you, you will not find me say that in any other board meeting, but it has just been remarkable, the courage of the district to actually kind of plow forward with strategies to try to serve the community and the parents in really uncertain times. and the imperative to try to get to a place where you're both safe but reopen has been an effort that you guys have really forged ahead on. The strategy and how to try to implement programs that will be meaningful instructionally kids, both in terms of the distance learning strategy that you guys have had, and then everything wrapped around how you do return to some level of in-person instruction. So I just want to tell you, it's been an honor for me to be associated with the district, given the kind of leadership that you guys have exercised. And again, you know, you get a lot of people who get up and make speeches, but those are not sort of empty compliments. They're really, really sincere. So now I wanted to tell you, because we've had a lot of work in front of us over the last year to try to do things that will protect the interests of the district specifically. And it started with the idea of, you know, the governor's, you know, in addition to all the implementation that we had going through the year on issues with regard to making sure people got paid and meals got served and all these other things. As we got closer to January and we realized that the budget estimates that the state was making were profoundly wrong. And then in this case, that was good news because it meant that the bottom was not falling out of the general fund, which would have then necessitated the deepest cuts in state history, which is what Gavin Newsom actually proposed last spring. He's basically backed off of almost all of it, not quite everything. So there still are funding deferrals that are in play that they're doing that we think they ought to be retiring, about a $3.7 billion remaining balance on funding deferrals to schools that need to be completely eliminated. He hasn't taken that step yet. We're going to lobby hard for that to happen. There are also commitments under the basic funding that we get for public education in California. All of you guys are smarter than your average school board member with regard to Prop 98 and know that Prop 98 has basically never really had much of an increase in its base. That is, it's about 38% of the state's general fund. The governor had proposed to boost that up to 40%, which actually is a very significant amount of money if he actually abides by the commitment that he made last summer, which was a $12.5 billion increase in the base permanently. But because things have turned out to be a little bit better economically, the governor's posing, and it's not getting very much press or media attention, to actually walk that back. He's called for a repeal of the provision of the Budget Act that was adopted last summer that would boost Prop 98 spending, which is all the spending we do on K-12 education, by $12.5 billion that he planned to incrementally increase over a 3-year period. He wants to back out of basically all of it, but he would give us sort of a consolation prize in this year's budget, the budget that starts July 1st, of about $2.3 billion of a one-time payment that doesn't have the effect of building the base of Prop 98. So that's going to be an area for fight. Finally, there's the issue about COLA, is that the cost of living increase that the governor has provided only on the local control funding formula would go back to the zero COLA that he gave for the year we're in the middle of. And he would bump that up in addition to the COLA for next year for a 3.84% COLA compounded over the 2 years. The problem is he doesn't spread it to the other categorical programs. And given that we're basic aid, we really do need that COLA applied to special ed and some of the other categorical programs. But think about special ed and what the district's expenditures are in that area, and the lack of putting a full COLA on it, I think undermines the governor's efforts to look like a governor that cares about special ed, because he is pumping more money into special ed in the budget. And that's actually a really good thing for the district. But to short us on the COLA just doesn't make sense. So we're going to be pushing real hard at the May revision, and if we don't get it there, in the final budget act on the COLA as well. So those are a couple of the budget issues. And then finally, on the governor's proposal that he had in January, on the 8th of January, to do a $2 billion incentive package for a return as this year for in-person instruction, had all kinds of problems with it. And it was so fraught with problems. I was one of those that recommended that districts not even take it, because I thought the mandates in it, both of the mandates that, you know, require you to go back to the collective bargaining table even when you've reached agreements with your labor partners, just stalls things out longer and actually incites, I think, not healthy relationships that are founded and executed at the local level to begin with. We thought the state had no business in mandating when and and the nature of when we go back to the bargaining table, we work those out all the time with organized labor, and we can do it now as well. The second mandate was an incredibly aggressive cadence for testing that was way beyond what would be necessary in K-12, given the fact that, more than half of our kids are, such a low risk in terms of transmission and contracting the virus. It didn't make sense for them to spending almost $2 billion. Almost all of it would have been gone on testing. Both of those issues were resolved in a three-part agreement between the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor. And I'm telling you, we were up against very, very stiff opposition, very powerful interests that were against us. And we ended up prevailing on both of those issues. So now we basically have a program that's free of any mandates, and the dollars will flow to every LEA across the state. And so that money comes to us. And then the question really is about what is the plan for in-person instruction? Will we meet those benchmarks to get some of that money, and knowing that the money actually will go further than just testing, COVID testing is a good thing. And I'm not sure what the staff is bringing to the board with regard to what your intentions are relative to that pot of money, but there's also the secondary pot of money, $4.6 billion to help inject funding to deal with extended learning, as well as interventions. There's money that'll be there. It will be distributed through the local control funding formula. So again, you guys will be at a disadvantage compared to a whole lot of districts, given the way the local control funding formula does have favor for districts that aren't exactly have the same kind of characteristics that you guys have. But those are the two developments. One is just getting that package done. It's the first time in my career when the legislature has acted on a major appropriation that precedes the Budget Act. We normally go into really high season relative to being busy around the Capitol building in a very furious way starting in May, when they've got a 30-day period to get that Budget Act finally done by June 15th. But the idea, we have two budget seasons. We had this for the last 2 months that kind of running folks ragged, and now we'll go through a May revision that will be on the regular part of the budget, and then finally a Budget Act in June. So I wanted to kind of give you just a little lay of the land, and like always, want to open it up to some questions, and I know that you probably may have some.
All right, thanks so much. Before we go to board questions, we do have one public comment, and that's going to be from Rebecca Eisenberg. Ms. Eisenberg, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. By the way, it'd be really cool if you could, now that you're streaming, if you could give the community an opportunity to have their face shown too, if they choose. There's no privacy concern if the individual chooses to have their face shown and isn't forced to have their face shown. So I'm just going to put in a plug for that, because I think we all know that for sure Zoom provides that functionality. But anyway, I spent 30 seconds saying that because I just have a couple questions for Mr. Gordon, whose face I no longer can see. I'd also like to see people when they talk to me. I don't need to see that whole screen to keep track of 3 minutes. So if you could put it back so I can see you all, that'd be helpful too. Anyway, to Mr. Gordon, who I can't see, I just have 2 questions. One is short, one is long. The short question is just as a matter of kind of administrative, just accuracy and social memory retention. Could you remind us how much your firm is paid by the school district for these, for the very valuable services you provide? I know that sometimes there's no answering questions, but maybe because I'm the only asker, there could be some. Second is, and maybe you can discuss this later too, I was very active in the Prop 15 campaign, and I was on the Speakers Bureau. As you know, Prop 15 was going to deliver at least $10 billion. Actually, for places like Palo Alto, it was estimated to be, it was told, hey, sorry, 1 second. I'm speaking live. Sorry, I have two teenagers and I'm not on my AirPods. Anyway, that it was going to deliver far more than the $1 million of estimated to Palo Alto. And I'm still on the mailing list in the community. And there are new efforts to reclaim the money that goes to large, wealthy corporate interests through the loophole in Prop 13. Are you going to be involved in any of that? Because I hope you will. I know that a couple of the school board members expressed to me that they didn't like Prop 15 because they didn't think it brought enough to Palo Alto as a basic aid district. And that's a valid opinion, although I disagree with it. But more importantly, there's no denying it was going to bring us some money. So I hope you can kind of speak to that as well too, because we're facing a big crisis here. And that's all. Thank you so much for considering these questions, and thank you for all of the hard work you do.
Great. And then I
Thank you
would
very
defer to the
much.
board president about what I can or can't respond to.
Yes, thank you for the comments. As you know, members of the public who are listening, we don't do questions from members of the public. Only board members can ask questions. And if board members would like to ask questions that members of the public ask, and that's their prerogative. I'll just remind board members that our agenda item is specific to the legislative update and nothing more than that. So board members, if you have questions, please do go ahead and raise your hand. And you can raise your hand if you're on Zoom, just physically. And I'll go ahead and call on you, okay? I don't see any comments. I have one question, which is, I think as a district, it's great when our superintendent and our staff can be leaders and move forward in teaching our students. I know we do best when we can work with our partners across the state, especially when we're dealing with sort of new pedagogical issues related to returning to school and incorporating technology. All that to say, Dr. Ross and I had the opportunity to meet with Governor Newsom and Senator Becker and Assemblymember Berman last week, and did discuss the issue of, the pressure on school board members across the state because of a lack of, and these were my words, but sort of a lack of support from the state with respect to local school boards reopening and a lack of direction. And so I guess my question to you is, and again, when we have that support, it's helpful not only to other school districts, but to us, because then we have partners who are moving along the same path and we can experiment with instructional methods and administrative issues that certainly come up in every district. Can you talk a little about any additional legislative or state sort of levers or incentives that are being discussed to, in addition to the financial incentive you mentioned, any others that are being discussed to encourage other school districts to reopen safely?
Yeah, I mean, they have cleared away. In fact, what was one of the things that we ended up being pretty broadly quoted on is that with the compromise that was reached, they cleared away almost every impediment that might be in the way that the state was creating, and they were creating plenty, but they just really stripped it all out of the bill. And the governor may have shared this with you, that after he did his proposal in January, and then obviously, I mean, I'll just be candid with you, I thought it was a little naive to propose on the 8th of January a package that would create a reopening opportunity that districts would have to apply for by February 1. And the legislature wasn't even back yet. The idea that the legislature had to return, they had to evaluate the legislation. For goodness sakes, it was a $6.6 billion package, or rather $6.4 billion package. That's a lot of money, and they weren't going to do that in 1 week. And then the other thing that was naive too was that, remember that the original proposal said that you have to have your application in by February 1, and that it would include a signed MOU by our labor partners or a collective bargaining agreement and the completed new school safety plan, all by February 1st. I mean, if anybody probably could have pulled it off, it was probably you guys. But the point is that it was a very shortened timeline, and then all the mandates for testing that existed. So then when he didn't get it, and he was having trouble with the legislature and deciding which way to go, and the legislature was actually adding to the mandates, not taking away from them, the governor came to the conclusion, and we had conversations with some of his staff, about the fact that if he had to do a redo of it, that he would have stripped out all the mandates and just said, look, let's create incentives. And instead of a district having to apply for the money, we're going to send it out to everybody. And if you can't hit these different benchmarks, you'll just send the money back. And that's exactly what they reverted to. So it's actually a really good plan now. And so what we need to be focused on now, I think, and the legislature is going to get there as a next step, we really need to be focused on what we're going to end up doing this fall. Everybody's been focused on how do we get reopened before the end of the year. And we're making the progress. You got the resources now, you got a game plan. We know what the guidance is at the state, which is no longer a mandate, it's just guidance. So they kind of got out of the way that way. But we really have some challenges in the fall if the California Department of Public Health does not modify those distancing requirements. And again, we want them to do it in accordance with what's good science. But when you look at the World Health Organization and you look at other metrics, the idea of the 6-foot guidance, is predicated without reference to mitigation. So they don't take into effect masks or the plexiglass dividers or any of the mitigation that we're doing in schools. We want them to revisit that guidance because if they can get it down to 3 feet, we could actually return way more to a normal environment in schools than what we'll be headed for. Because if they don't change that, I don't think parents in the community are accept the idea that when we come back in the fall, we're going to be just doing some of the hybrid stuff that we've been doing. The state legislature needs to move more affirmatively in that direction. And they're just starting to make noises about that, but we're going to have to hear a whole lot more.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Brianza.
Thanks. Thank you for this, and thanks for advocating for all students at the state level. My question really has to do with what you just mentioned. We're just starting to hear murmurings from other districts that they're telling their families that there's a chance they might still be in hybrid this fall. That sounds insane to me because the vaccine will be widely available, from the spring. So I think that this board and this district has in our head, everyone will be back 5 days a week in person. That's what we're going to do. So can you tell us sort of what it sounds like? The big thing might be spacing, although that's the guidance before vaccinations. So it seems a little crazy that it might still be after. But are there any other things that are pointing you towards this maybe being a thing for us? And is there anything that we or our families could be doing right now to make sure that come August, it's not hard for us to have every kid back on campus?
I do think that I'm optimistic that they'll get there, but I don't think it hurts at all that we got a lot of parent engagement to say that it's unacceptable not to be modifying that guidance or to start making plans and talking about it now among state lawmakers. And we do need to have parent engagement with lawmakers to say there better be a plan for the fall to modify this guidance. I do think the distancing requirements are the single greatest impediment. I think almost everything else, we got resources, we got a lot of other things. There's federal assistance on its way. And by the way, just a little note on the federal package, the disproportionate amount of the money that's coming from the feds almost doesn't even stop at the state capital. It goes straight out to local education agencies through Title I. Title I is strongly biased toward districts with high numbers of kids in poverty. So one of the things that we know is that the challenges of standing up a school for in-person instruction, all the challenges of mental health and all the other issues that we're dealing with affect all kids. And so one of the things that they did do was one of those amendments, one of those gajillion amendments that the Senate took up, they actually adopted, and it was a good one. It was to pare some of the money away from just going out onto the Title I distribution and actually pumping up the money that goes out to special ed. That means those are resources that you guys will definitely benefit from. We know we've got special ed costs in the district that are big, and it'll help defray some of those costs. So that's a good thing too. But we do need engagement in the process. We're engaging certainly on behalf of you guys about this. Lawmakers and the governor and pressure on the fall. We need to take steps to make sure that we're getting back to an ability to serve all kids. So,
So if I'm a parent in the district and I really want to put that pressure on, who am I reaching out to right now?
Your assembly member, your senator, and definitely the governor. They got to hear that.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Board members, any other comments? All right. Well, thanks so much for the update. It's
Thank you.
I know I
Great.
find it extremely valuable.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you all.
All right, next, we're going to move on to open forum. Anyone wishing to address the board on non-agenda items can do so at this time. Again, if your comment is regarding an agendized item, I'll stop you and we'll have to move you to that agenda item. We have 4 members of the public, and so you will each have 3 minutes. The first is Sarah Woodham, followed by Jeremy Ehrman, followed by Arya Sufiani.
Ms. Woodham? She's not unmuting.
Ms. Woodham, you can unmute. Otherwise, we'll come back to you. All right, let's do Jeremy Ehrman, Arya Sufiani, and then Rebecca Eisenberg.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Jeremy Ehrman. I'm a pianist and music director. I have worked in Palo Alto Unified School District choir and theater programs at various times for over 20 years. And I was working in the district up through almost a year ago, March 13th, when everything shut down. As a musician and artist, it's been pretty distressing to witness the state of the arts in the school district and in the state over the past year, from the state to the county to the school district level. The arts have pretty much been brushed aside. The state, in fact, only created a live performances industry guidance category just last week for the first time. So I'm really concerned about Palo Alto's art programs going forward, especially the performing programs like music and theater. There does not seem to have been a lot of effort or thought put into these activities continuing. But unfortunately, it really seems like a double standard from the state, the county, and I'm afraid the district, because huge amounts of time and effort have been put into athletic guidelines. At every step along the way in the pandemic, the state, the county, and the district have said, what can we do with sports at this time? And have prioritized that. Music, theater, arts has essentially been, oh, well, these are high risk, so we can't do any of them. So I'm really concerned about the double standard that's been put in place, that sports is always, what can we do? And essentially, the county's guidelines for music was, oh, well, we're frightened of singing and wind instruments, so therefore, all music in person is banned, even though, for example, an outdoor string orchestra rehearsal is logically safer than outdoor athletic training because musicians can be spaced out in chairs and perform spaced out. So I just really wish that and I realize that much of what the district has done is follow county guidance, but I really wish the district would really look much more at artistic activities and really ask those hard questions. Why in the world is sports constantly prioritized in person, but yet the arts are just pushed away? You know, we are trained to be creative, and yet somehow government and the district have just not wanted to have any creative ideas for in-person arts. And I really think that it's doing the students grave disservice. And I really ask you to prioritize the arts as much as you prioritize athletics. Thank you.
Thank you. Arya Sufiani, followed by Rebecca Eisenberg, and then Sarah Woodham.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you at everyone at district office for working effortlessly with our admin team to open up the school sites, to welcome our students to school. I'm sure this was not an easy, it was very, I'm sure many sleepless nights came into this. First and foremost, I wanted to bounce an idea, since we are receiving funding now from Gavin Newsom for opening the school before April 1st, as well as funding from President Biden. If we can use some of that funding to provide a hero pay for admin, teaching staff, as well as classifieds. cost of healthcare has gone up, and frankly, we can use additional EAP as well, given that everyone is on edge from this pandemic. We've been losing family members, and everyone can use a little bit of help. And also for special education, I have a concern. As an aide myself, I've been shifted around from one student that I was working with for about 6 months now. And when I inquired about the student change, they said they're giving it to somebody else because somebody else has another underlying condition and they disclose their health information. I don't agree with that, and I didn't find that very helpful because it should not be at the cost of our most valuable students and our stakeholders. So I want to know if we can address that issue too, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Eisenberg, and then Sarah Woodham.
Hi there. Thanks again. First, I want to thank you and point out that what you guys are doing is streaming. Look how easy streaming is. You have some of you that are in person, while others are remotely at home. And if you did what I and so many others have been asking, allowing us to show our faces and to see yours, except for instead of this superfluous countdown screen, maybe we could start to come close to the experience that we used to have in democracy when the community used to be able to be in that room as well. Because you said in the start of the meeting that you all are a person there, but my question is whether we all can be there too. But of course, you don't answer questions, God forbid. Which brings me to the second point, which is about democracy. I'm just going to say this again. You all really could do better about giving at least lip service to valuing input from the community. It's kind of shocking how unwilling you all are to see our faces, to listen, to respond, to let, even though there's only one speaker, to let the guest here answer the very valid questions, or to, as a courtesy, to re-ask them on my behalf. That sure would have been nice. I don't know if you all know this, but there are actually a lot of parents who are talking about recalling you all. You're not popular right now, and you have cited yourself a lack of good relationships between you and the community. Now, I'm not here to worsen that. I mean, and despite what Don Austin said, I had literally nothing to do with that. I spent a lot of my time running for city council last year, but I'm happy to help you out. But it'd be easy. My advice to you is it'd be very easy for you to improve your relationship with the community if you would just work a little harder on at least giving the perception of involving the community in your decisions, or taking the community's point of view seriously, or responding to community questions, or asking community questions to the speakers. It would just be really nice, because most people are not thrilled with this so-called return to school thing. It remains yet to be seen whether these laptops are going to be able to stay charged for 8 hours, without AC adapters. There's so many little things parents could have helped with that you aren't interested in involving parents. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we have Sarah Woodham.
Oops. Oh, hi. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Sarah Woodham. I have 2 kids. I've got a 5th grader and an 11th grader currently, and my 11th grader actually went to school today. But I wanted to make a comment on something that, purely for planting a seed. Because I do recognize and appreciate the complexity of work that's going to be needed just to get us up and running as we emerge from COVID education. But what I wanted to plant the seed for, for us as a district, was for figuring out how we could offer the Connections program or a project-based learning option at each of our 3 middle schools. So I've just gone through the process with my current 5th grader of applying to connections, as I did 7 years ago with my now graduated kid. And in that case, he was like 80th on the wait list. At that time, there was only one connection class, I guess 25 kids. They doubled it. And this year, when I went through it with my current 5th grader, he was 115th on the wait list. I'm assuming that maybe he's near the bottom of the wait list, but if that's the case, I'm sort of calculating that to mean that there are about 175 kids who are asking for an option around connections or project-based learning. I'd love to know actually the actual number of kids who did apply for the program, if at some point that gets to be made transparent. But at something close to like 200 kids, that's almost half of a sixth grade at Green or JLS middle school. And at that level of demand, or interest, I sort of feel as though it'd be great that we offer that at each of our 3 middle schools, because I also know that there are families in like the Green neighborhood who don't apply just because they're not interested in having their kids schlep past Green to go to JLS for the program. So again, I recognize that this is totally not a priority for now, but I really would appreciate if somehow this seed could be planted somewhere so that we can try and make something happen, in the coming years. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have our consent calendar. These items are considered routine and they'll be approved in one action without discussion. If a member of the public wishes to comment on any consent item, or if a board member would like to pull an item from consent, we'll consider it right afterwards under action items. We have no public comment on consent items. Board members?
I move we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay.
Second.
All right, motion by Dr. DeBrienza, second by Ms. Ladomirak. Dr. Austin, would you call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Atla,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Ms. Ladomirak,
Aye.
Steve Rienza,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
drop.
Aye. Okay, consent calendar approved. Moving on to action items. Item 5A is the 2020-21 second interim budget report.
All right, this is our second time on this item, and we asked Ms. Chow to just hit a couple of highlights, some things that maybe we didn't touch on the first time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Austin. Just an overview of where we are at second interim. At the last board meeting, we reviewed the draft of the general fund at second interim. And the reason we reviewed a draft with the preliminary data was because we were waiting on some updated numbers on the property tax revenue. This information comes out from the county assessor and controller's office. So the draft was shared with the board based on the information that we had at the time of posting. And tonight, the full second interim is presented for board approval, including the revised general fund, the capital funds, all other funds, as well as the multi-year projection. The attached board item, as well as the PowerPoint on the general fund, are updated. They have strike-throughs to show deletions, and the blue italics show the additions since the last board meeting. We presented in this fashion so that we could meet the board's practice of the 2-meeting rule. So with that information, I'm going to jump into a bit of details and let you know what's different since the February meeting. So there's actually just the one update. Second interim has been updated to reflect the current property tax growth of 6.92%, which is about 0.76% increase, a little over 0.75% increase over first interim. And in terms of dollar increase, it's 1.484 million on the line item that's identified as LCFF revenue sources, if you're following that. There were no further changes to expenditures, so the ending fund balance has been increased by that same amount. With the increase in property tax revenue, we are estimating an unassigned ending fund balance of about 15 million. So for folks that are watching the ending fund balance, I will simply say that this is higher than projected at budget interim and higher again the first interim. However, I need to emphasize the benefits of having a positive ending fund balance, because it puts the district in a fortunate position of being able to stay ahead of the curve in terms of safety and innovative learning strategies as we move through the pandemic. It's the very reason that Governor Newsom visited our district and held us up as a model for reopening schools. So a quick summary of where we are at second interim is that we're well positioned to finish this school year with the supplies and equipment necessary for in-person instruction at all grade levels, as well as having the luxury of planning for uncertainty and unforeseen needs in the next school year. One of the focus areas that we're seeing from the governor, and Kevin Gordon mentioned this as well, is that in addition to reopening schools, there is the focus is on providing expanded learning opportunities. This is a trend we will likely continue to see into the future. Having an ending fund balance that allows us to meet the needs of our students without having to wait for supplemental funding from the state or federal government is a plus. Here's what else we gain by having some available funds. First, these funds are unrestricted because they are tax dollars, so they can be identified for future use by the district. They're not driven by state mandates or external compliance requirements. Second, they allow the district to be nimble and to move quickly. So for example, we were able to purchase additional air purification units and make improvements to our indoor air quality long after the CARES Act funding was fully expended. And it's because of this ending fund balance. Our secondary sites open today largely because of these COVID safety investments. And finally, the benefits of having an ending fund balance is that it provides options, especially as we move into budget development for next year. Further exploring these options with our ending fund balance will be one of the topics of our budget study session for next week. And that concludes second interim overview presentation.
Thank you very much. Before we get to board comments, we do have one public comment, and that is going to be from Rebecca Eisenberg. Ms. Eisenberg, you have 3 minutes.
There, I don't think I'll take that long. I just wanted to say that, I just want to, darn, now I get that timer again. I just want to say that, last week I did bring up, if anybody ever is listening out there, hello, that this really does show undeniably, see, I don't get to see who's laughing, undeniably show that the school district is experiencing issues with recruitment and retention. All of the decreases in projected spending are due to having fewer teachers and staff to pay. Now, that is just the worst possible position for the school district to be in, given the need both for smaller cohorts and the need for expanded mental health services, which I expect you'll be discussing below. This was a great opportunity to see some line items in the budget for expenditures in that regard. Wonderful that you have $1.8 million more to spend than you did before. Not wonderful, but that's because you have all these open positions. It's going to be so much harder to have smaller cohorts and more consistent, groups throughout the day if you don't hire more teachers. Additionally, it's just undeniably true that Palo Alto needs to prioritize teacher and staff housing. And how nice it would have been to see a line item on this budget for a consultant or someone to take the time and use professional expertise to reopen that extraordinarily urgent, essential need. You're not going to be able to hire the best teachers or retain the best teachers without something like teacher housing. And it just won't be as safe for teachers when they commute such long distances. It's science, it's math, it's common sense. Teachers need housing, and how wonderful that you have $2 million more. Please start working on this on behalf of our kids. From the children's point of view, there is nothing other than the teacher. So let's act that way. Thank you so much for considering.
Thank you very much. All right, board members, colleagues, do you have any comments on this item? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Chow, thank you for the update. And budget related, we'll be having a board study session on budget coming up as well. So is there a motion?
I move we approve the draft second interim financial report for the general fund and the budget revisions listed for revenues and expenditures.
And I second.
Okay, so moved by Dr. DeBrienza, seconded by Ms. Latimerek. Ms. Chow?
Can I just make one comment? We need to omit the word draft in the
Oh.
recommendation. This is the final second interim.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want me to repropose it, or can we just say it doesn't have word draft in it?
We can you can make a friendly amendment.
Okay, I'd like to amend removing the word draft, just approving the second interim financial report.
Okay, there's a motion on the table to approve the second interim financial report, essentially what's listed here without the word draft. Dr. Austin?
All right, Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Ms. Atla,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Vladimir,
Aye.
Ms. DeBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Drop.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Thank you again, Ms. Chow. Moving on to item 5B, revised COVID-19 testing plan.
All right. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Conway in just a second, but first I'd like to thank her for all of her hard work on this. Not only organizing and coordinating the efforts of the testing of PAEA members, which is part of our memorandum of understanding, but then taking on the additional piece of looking at some of the other ways that we can serve not only our staff, but potentially students as well. So very much appreciated. So Ms. Conway, it is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. As you know, the Predison MOU originally came to the board on February the 23rd for just a review. Tonight it's presented here again for approval, but I want to make sure that the board is aware that we are continuing our partnership with Stanford for testing, but we'll be shifting at a critical time period pending the approval of the MOU. So Predison's partnership will allow us to continue to provide asymptomatic testing, which we are already doing with our PAEA staff. But we have the added advantage of being able to routinely, monthly, and through surveillance testing, address the needs of our student population as well. So we'll be looking at surveillance testing at somewhere around a threshold of 25%, and then also testing of individuals with recent or known suspected exposure to COVID-19. So that's an addition to what we're already doing. We are not currently testing any symptomatic individuals, but this does allow us an opportunity when we identify that there's been a close contact to be able to offer that so that parents can facilitate the testing at home with their children. So we believe this is a great advantage, and we'll leave it to the board to make the decision on the approval.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we don't have any public comments on this. Board members, comments? Dr. DeBrienza, and then Ms. Latimerek.
Thanks. Thank you for this, all the work on this. I just have a few questions. I wanted to clarify, it sounds like all teachers must be tested and all CSEA members may be tested. Is that right? That is correct. We are encouraging all of our staff to get tested on a regular routine basis. But in terms of the mandatory requirement, that is only for PAEA members. Okay. If
Okay, do we yet know like what students will be included and when, or is that still to figure out?
Well, technically, all students will be included, but it will be a randomized approach to the 25% that we're looking for. So our minimum is that we're looking at each testing event, 25% of the enrollment.
Okay,
And that could be enrollment at the individual school or enrollment across the district that we're looking
okay,
at.
so just randomly
Correct.
each time we do it.
Mhm.
And finally, I'm not sure I'm totally clear on, it sounds like sometimes there are sites on campus where teachers can come and others that are this take-home, do-it-yourself kit.
So right now we are doing on campus. We're phasing that out across the 30 days and we'll be reducing that on-site opportunity. But teachers will still have access to pick up their test on site or even to conduct their test on site and have it available for pickup during the courier pickup time.
So everyone will do their own test.
Right, correct.
And if you're not sure how to do that or not comfortable, that's that number you can call. You can.
We have
call in.
videos, we have phone numbers,
Okay.
there's lots of support for that. And also as from a district perspective, we can push out information to employees on a regular basis.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Lettermirac?
Thank you, Ms. Conway, for this. Ms. DiBrienza asked a couple of my questions, so I want to just confirm my understanding of the plan for students.
Mhm.
You could just break it and correct me if I start to get it wrong. So the way I read the report is we're going to give families a date by which to register,
Correct.
right? And then they're going to choose to either register for testing or not. It's totally optional.
Opt in. Mhm.
Okay, and then once we see how many families register, then we're going to determine how often to provide testing at that point and how like what the cadence will be once we
Right.
see how many people have opted in.
No, the registration is just for the benefit of the providers so that they will know who's actually being tested.
Okay,
Our job is to make sure that we're identifying a reasonable surveillance cadence so that we are hitting 25% of our enrollment on a regular routine basis. So that could very well be on a monthly basis, we're randomizing for that 25%. Could be 25% at each site, or like I said, 25% across the district.
okay, all right. So the registration is just hit them in, and then no matter how many people register,
Correct.
it'll probably be the same cadence.
Correct.
Depending, okay. And then the kids are literally just gonna take
They
the
take a kid
tests
home.
home
Mhm.
in their Monday envelopes or something, and then bring them back, and
They
they'll be
can,
like a drop
correct. Well,
off.
they can bring them back or the parent can mail them off directly.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Great. Board members, any additional comments or student board members? Okay. Mr. Lee?
Hi, I just have one question about the flexibility of access to testing. So if you were a student and let's say you weren't selected to be tested for surveillance testing on a certain week, do you still have the opportunity to drop in and get tested, or is that not available?
There are two ways that just any student can get tested, and that means that there is a confirmed COVID or close contact. For example, if a family member has a COVID test and it come back positive, then we could actually provide a test. Or if a student enters the nurse and exhibits signs of any COVID signs, then a kit can be sent home with the student once the student is picked up.
Okay, so absent those two circumstances, students shouldn't be dropping in to get tested unless they
Correct.
were selected. Okay.
That is
got it.
correct.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Conaway, for the update. Well, for the item, actually. Do we have a motion, board members? This is for action.
I move that the board approve the memorandum of understanding with Prednisine.
Yes, and I second.
Okay, so moved by Dr. DiBrienza, seconded by Ms. Ladomirac. Dr. Austin?
Yes, Ms. Atla,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Ms. Vladimir,
Aye.
DeBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
and Mr. Drop.
Aye. All right, the MOU is approved. Okay, let's go ahead and move right along. We have no discussion items today, but we're moving to staff reports. The first,
We have one more
oh,
action item.
sorry, missed that.
Okay.
It's on the flipped page. Okay, we have item 5C, which is further modifications to pre-qualification resolutions.
A property committee thing.
Yes, we have Dr. Golden here to help us out.
Hi, good evening.
The district pre-qualifies bidders for our construction projects. This activity is incredibly important because hiring a problematic contractor creates a host of major difficulties. We now use a firm Quality Bidders, which provides pre-qualification services to more than 80 districts. This firm has a standard questionnaire and rating system the board has previously approved. We've been examining contractors in the past based on our additionally strong criteria. We've been advised by our attorney to be useful to have these criteria also approved by the board. So we're seeking that approval tonight. An adjustment regarding the criteria presented for approval tonight, we do have an edit to make. We wish to amend the criteria by deleting item 4D and then renumbering 4E as the new 4D. Item 4A already has this criterion. We appreciate a board member who called this to our attention. We're also requesting a waiver of the 2-meeting rule so that this can be in place immediately. Thank you.
Okay. Board members?
Would you like to do the 2-meeting rule first?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Is there a motion on the 2-meeting rule?
I move that we waive the 2-meeting rule for this item.
Second.
All right, so moved by Dr. DeBrienza, seconded by Ms. Ladimir.
All right, Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Sattler,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Sladimeric,
Aye.
DeBrienza,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
and Mr. Drop.
Aye. Okay, is there a motion on the substantive approval?
I don't know if any other board members have questions about that. I guess I'll make the motion. I move, let me see if I get the wording right on this. I move that we further modify resolutions 2016-17.7 and 2016-17.8 to include additional criteria as shown in Exhibit C.
I second.
Okay, moved by Dr. Brienza, seconded by Ms. Ladimir.
All right,
Do
Ms.
we-
Sattler?
Is there any discussion on it? I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, no pressure for any discussion.
I didn't
just-
see any raised hands, but board members, certainly, if you do have comments, feel free.
The property committee had this, so I think, I mean, I'm happy to try to answer questions, or I'm sure Dr. Golden can, but it sounds like maybe we don't have any.
Okay, no questions. Let's move to the roll.
All right, Ms. Sattler,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
DeBrienza,
Aye.
Sladimeric,
Aye.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Dauber,
Aye.
Mr. Drop.
Aye. Okay, and the motion passes. All right, thank you, Dr. Golden, very much, and thank you to the much lauded property committee for its hard work. Items 7A, student well-being.
Sofek, are you starting this? I'm going to have Sofek introduce our presenter for tonight, and he'll lead us through this item. It's just a staff report tonight.
Yeah, so thank you. This evening, we have the Director of Student Services, Jason Krolikowski, here to share some information and updates about the health and wellness activities happening on campus as we return to school. So I'll turn things over to him, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers.
Thank you. Good evening. It's nice to see some of you in person for the first time. This is my first time live, so great to be here. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share our efforts to promote student wellness, specifically as they return to secondary sites. I was on campuses this morning, and there was such an exciting buzz. Visiting school is always a great reminder of why we do this work, which is our students. Students in the community are thrilled with the return to campus, and while there is a lot to celebrate and there will be plenty of smiles, students may also be struggling with the unknown or unseen challenges. It's for this reason that we commit to doing a face-to-face, as appropriate, check-in with each student who's returning to campus this week and beyond, which will be discussed in detail later in this report. Students who continue in distance learning will receive virtual check-ins as well through a variety of platforms such as breakout rooms and Zoom and formal and informal surveys. If you're watching this right now and you need support or you know someone who needs support, please visit our PAUSD website at pausd.org for resources or contact your school counselor, principal, or any trusted adult that you know. We've been providing support and care for our students in person and online. Our wellness centers, academic counselors, CASI therapists provide opportunities for students to work through challenges and receive support. Sites use a tiered level of support to address students' well-being. This includes Tier 1 or universal strategies that are applied for all students, and into Tier 2, where students can possibly be referred to therapy with one of our many partner agencies, such as CASI Therapists, the Asian American for Community Involvement, and Stanford. CASI Therapists return to school this week in person and will continue to provide services in person and remotely. The PAUSD promise states that we will provide for the social, emotional, and physical health needs of students and cultivate positive climates, identity safe school environments that promote high levels of connection, engagement, and overall well-being throughout the school community. This promise demands that our employees meet our students where they are right now. One way we will accomplish this is through building student connections. In the opening, I mentioned that students would receive support through personal check-ins as they re-enter school. We believe that teacher interaction is the best and first line of support to identify students who may need resources beyond the classroom. In order to meet the needs of each individual student, and on campus, for example, a teacher, administrator, counselor, or support staff, or even coaches, will have a brief 3 to 5 minute conversation with each student. Students will be referred to additional support as needed, which can include counseling and therapy. Currently, there are 131 students between both high schools receiving therapy through our service providers. Another resource that we have for families is Care Solace, which provides reliable, ethical, and high-quality mental health care services, no matter the circumstance. To date, since July of 2020, 540 families in our school district have worked with Care Solace. Check-ins will provide the ability to monitor and support individual students. And additionally, staff will need to focus on the 3 R's of reopening school for students: relationships, routines, and resilience. Students will need time and patience to build relationships with each other and teachers, and vice versa. They will need to learn and practice in-classroom routines and build resilience as they increase stamina for the long day, which is possibly made more complicated by COVID safety precautions. I'd like to applaud our Director of Professional Learning, Dr. Kelly Bickle, and Coordinator of Educational Technology, Ms. Emily Gerson, who's done a fantastic job supporting teachers in these areas through Monday meetups, which is a professional development opportunity for teachers. Further, our Wellness Staff Center has facilitated Monday meetups in support of teacher wellness. Supporting staff in their own wellness is a priority so that they can give students the support they need. Sites will monitor the 3 R's as they impact the well-being of our students through the face-to-face check-ins, which will continue routinely or as appropriate until we can say with confidence all of our students have received personalized attention and support. It's important that we use this opportunity to learn from our collective experiences and really make some significant shifts in the lives of students and their families. The data in this report supports continued solicitation of student experience input in an effort to monitor implementation of existing strategies and guide development of new goals and approaches to reducing negative impacts of stress on students. Homework, as it relates to wellness, is a topic that's been discussed at length and requires the alignment of attitudes and beliefs about rigor and workload across all stakeholder groups. And that'll be essential for continuous improvement. We should acknowledge the research presented in this report that shows 2 hours per night is the max a student should be receiving, and anything more than that will have detrimental effects on their mental health and physical health. And really, we should be applying the 10-minute rule, which is essentially for the grade you were in, multiply by 10 minutes, 9th grade equals 90 minutes, etc. We provided data that shows improvement from 2017 to 2019 that shows Gunn High School improved the amount of students who indicated too much homework. And I think 1% is something to be applauded, and it's something that we will continue to work on. Staff and students, though, have refined what homework may look like, as almost all work has been done at home during distance learning, and distinguishing between the 2 lines can be blurry. Implementation of pilot alternative homework strategies with the belief that it will result in reduced homework load and more effective homework for students, with the goal of compliance to board policy and administrative regulation 6145. Identification of best practices currently occurring within PAUSD will continue to be highlighted and shared for widespread adoption. And finally, the Panorama Survey will, as we've mentioned before, will have a module focusing on homework. Once completed, site leadership groups will engage in data inquiry and action planning. And into learning about start times. Anecdotal evidence suggests that students appreciate a later start time. Most studies indicate increased sleep has a direct correlation to wellness at its critical time for healing, regulation, and restoration. Benefits of later start times have been documented and concluded that students who start later have better attendance, sleep more, have better mental health outcomes, and less use of unhealthy substances. PAUSD is convening a secondary schools bell schedule committee where one of the objectives is to build on the opportunity the pandemic has provided to align our schools to have the same bell schedule. The Student Services Department will participate in the committee to promote the benefits of later start times on student well-being. Lastly, this is not just for the Wellness Center, this is for how we operate with wellness within our department. It's a visual of the coordinated services for wellness and PAUSD. The collaboration of multiple agencies and employees shows the level of commitment to provide wellness for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We do have public comment on this one. Just one public comment, and that is from Rebecca Eisenberg. That's 3 minutes, Ms. Eisenberg.
Thank you. Can you please, nope, too late, then not show me that timer. Okay, that's fine. Actually, it's not fine, but it's something I'll have to live with. So thank you for that presentation. First, I do want to say that teachers have expressed a lot of concern about students being rigorous with their safety protocols, and just pointing out the elephant in the room here. Masks do not help if they're not worn correctly. And I think it is important for adults to role model that at all times. And I can promise you that when I have seen kids, I have 2 high schoolers, wear masks, they have had no problem keeping the masks up. So that said, I definitely wanted to speak to this topic because I strongly believe that the school district can't possibly have a handle on the true ramifications of this isolation that our children have been experiencing and continue to experience. And I think that applying the old approaches to social emotional development is definitely a recipe for failure. For example, relationships, routines, resilience. Well, I think our children have shown more than anything else that over the past more than a year, that what they have is resilience, probably a lot more than most adults. Additionally, routines, I actually think they're okay with that too. Now, relationships definitely can use some work, but I guess what I'd like to see here is a more thoughtful and rigorous and updated approach to really addressing the actual new unprecedented issues that are facing the kids right now. It's most psychologists who, as you should know, as you probably know, who have looked at this, and you can read all sorts of recent articles and all sorts of academic and commercial consumer press, what they're talking about is the essential role of schools as providing a place for kids to practice adulting in a safe environment. I mean, if you think of things like school dances, prom, dating, these are ways for kids to practice these adult skills. For those of us like myself who have kids going to college next year, it is extraordinarily frightening, horrifying that they do not have practice. So more than relationships, we need opportunities for kids to practice social skills. Thank you.
Thank you. Board colleagues, do we have any comments or questions on Mr. Kolakowski's great presentation? Dr. DiBrienza, and then Ms. Latimirak.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And I so appreciate the attention that we've all been talking for months about the adjustment back, right? That for a lot of kids, they really haven't seen anyone but their family in a very long time. And it's a shock to the system. I think it's great that we had several hundred kids on campus today, not several thousand, and that there's a chance for kids to readjust. So I appreciate that. thank you for all the data you just gave about how many students are receiving each of the services that you've mentioned. 540 families working with Care Solace is amazing. That's an extraordinary number. I actually wasn't sure if we'd have those data available because I think we do a referral, but then we don't really know who's engaged. So that's an exceptional number. I think that I love the goal of getting, eyes on every kid in the first week or two that we're back. It's probably a pretty Herculean task, but with all the staff that's on, from teachers to counselors and everything else, hopefully there will be natural ways to make that happen. So I really appreciate that update. As for the homework, I'm glad to see it's headed in the right direction. It clearly, I think, needs to move more if we're at something like 47% still thinking it's too much. I don't know what else has to happen. I don't know what the next thing that happens that continues that number going down. Obviously, it's a good trend, but has farther to go. So I think in the future, I'd be interested in hearing staff suggestions, especially as we're returning to campus. I appreciated that in the report, it acknowledged that right now it all feels like homework. So it's probably really hard to measure what's too much homework or not because it's all happening at home or has been for the past year. But as we get back into in-person learning, hearing from staff about really what are the next steps in trying to make sure that very few, if any, of our kids feel like it's just too much at the end of a school day. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ledemira.
Thank you very much for that report. It was really helpful. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for all the attention being given to mental wellness as students and teachers are transitioning back to in-person learning. I can feel that in that report. And I really, it's very heartening. I want to reiterate what Ms. DiBrienta said about just gratitude for prioritizing those one-on-one in-person reach outs to the students who are returning. We know there are a lot of kids returning who have not reached out for online supports because it was just too difficult or they couldn't handle Zoom anymore, or whatever it was. So I really appreciate the proactiveness. I do, it feels aspirational to me to reach every kid in 2 weeks. So I love the ambition and also the systematizing of the check-ins and making them iterative. So I appreciate the ambition, but I also realize that staff, staff is also transitioning back too, and people are really busy. And I think I appreciated you sort of listed all the different people that could be involved. I think the kids see their teachers every day, and there's a lot of adults who can have those reach outs, not just counselors. So again, thank you. I love the aspiration, and I certainly trust the schools to figure out, an approach that's feasible and effective. I also just want to say, and I can tell from that report that this is not something that needs to be said, but I'm going to say it anyways. I want to recognize that, all the excitement and energy and changes that are accompanying our return to in-person school may have a compounding effect on the kids who are not returning. It may actually make them feel more isolated, more alone, seeing their teachers and their friends back. So I sort of want to say this to our whole educational community, because it really does take a village. I mean, it's teachers and administrators and counselors certainly, but it's also students and it's parents. We really need to make sure to be mindful and stay vigilant and really look for ways to reach out and wrap supports around the kids who are still at home as well. And I just have a couple. Does anybody else want to? You can come back to me if.
Go ahead. I didn't see any other comments, questions.
Okay. A few statements sort of from the staff report really stood out to me, sort of beyond right now and reopening. There was a statement about the data supporting continued solicitation of student experience input and alignment of attitudes and beliefs about rigor and workload across stakeholder groups. And to me, these statements really get how crucial it is for students themselves to talk to us about mental wellness, and for us to really recognize as we evaluate and we plan that students are very separate stakeholders from parents. And I think I can say that as a parent. I think that mental wellness is a place not necessarily in theory, but in the specific contributors and how to address them. I think this is a place where students and parents most often diverge on what is needed or wanted in our schools. And so I am a huge proponent of the surveys that you mentioned, because it's a place where students really get a chance to express their own perspectives. But I also would love to encourage us to explore mechanisms beyond surveys that enable students to provide some real-time input. So they're really the experts in what schools feel like. And you know, as we come out of this pandemic and we really have a unique opportunity to reset, I think they really need to be front and center in our conversations and decision-making about what that reset looks like.
All right, thank you. Okay, no additional comments. Oh, Mr. Dauber.
Thank you, Mr. Drop. I had a few questions and comments, beginning with the start time question. I understand that the district is convening a secondary schools bell schedule committee. What is the timeline on that committee's convening and completing their work?
Good evening, Mr. Dauber. We have a tentative timeline, and we actually are communicating out to our sites for input on selection of committee members just this week. So please, everybody who's listening and board members, know that this is a timeline, but our goal is to have our first gathering on the 22nd of this month and be able to come forward with some kind of outcome. I'm just looking for the final date. Hold on, sorry. Yeah, I think it's like it's about 2 months. So in early May, I can get you the final question, the final date in a second when after your next question. So
Okay, I don't need it exactly. That's good enough. I see a sentence in the staff report that says that the Student Services Department will provide feedback and data to the committee to support the benefits of later start times on student well-being. We spoke, I don't know, 2 or 3 board meetings ago on the subject of start times, and I heard a clear board majority in favor of later start times than the ones that are state mandated of 8 and 8:30. I think there was a bit of a negotiation going on, but I think I remember 9, 9:30, and 10 o'clock being mentioned. So I want to take the opportunity to ask what guidance the committee is getting on secondary school start times to understand whether we need to clarify in terms of board action what the parameters should be.
Yeah, Mr. Dauber, I can tell you I will be providing some of that guidance to the group. And I heard loud and clear that don't consider anything before 8:30, and we would much probably have strong support the closer we get to 9 o'clock. We also have a family survey that's going out this week. I just got the second draft back this morning, which asked some questions around that piece. We just want to make sure we're not missing something. I think we know exactly, well, I should say this. We have a strong idea of what any positions to oppose a later start time would be. And I think we're all aware of that. And that does not seem to be a big enough impact right now, but we just want to make sure that we're not missing something. And then again, this is a negotiable item. The hours that our staff works are negotiable. So we'll just need to make sure that anything we come back with, we can make work through negotiations as a working condition. There won't be any question for the group that a later start time is the direction of the board.
That was a little vaguer than I would have liked. I think before 8.
I like your odds at 9 o'clock. How's that?
Okay, that's definitely getting closer. I want to make sure, Dr. Austin, that we don't get into a situation where where the committee works, comes back with some, for high school, something like 8:40. And the real number is not 8:40. The real number is more like 9 o'clock or 9:15 or whatever the board, I'm not speaking for the board, obviously. I'm just getting a sense about where board members are. So if we need to take action in order to make that clear, you should tell us now, rather than create a situation where there's a fire drill at the end. That's really my main concern.
All I'm thinking right now, Mr. Dauber, is that there could be benefits if the board set a starting time for students. I'm not sure this agenda item was set up for action. In fact, it wasn't. So that would be a posting issue. What I would offer to you is perhaps the three of us that are on agenda setting talk that through. And we can decide if that would make sense. I don't think there's a downside though.
Okay, great. I'm not suggesting we take action tonight, but I do want to make sure the opportunity doesn't pass without, making it clear. And I think it could well be that the right thing to do is just take board action and make it clear and so on. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Sorry to put you on the spot, but
that's okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying question though? About
please.
that? We have surveys back from families before then, right? I mean, and I don't think this is going to happen, but if somehow 80% of families wanted to start at 8 o'clock, right? We might at least want to talk about it before we.
Yeah, so they're not going to take action in agenda setting in any way. I think they'll just talk about whether it should come back here for action. And I think, I mean, in my mind, if 80% of our families say they want it to start at 8 o'clock, then there's some follow-up to find out why they wanted to start earlier, because all we're hearing is how great it is, right?
Right.
And I'm sure not everyone thinks that, but I think a lot think that. So, I think that's a conversation ahead of us.
Well, I'm actually right now just rethinking that question altogether. By the way, if families wanted to start at 8 o'clock, it's prohibited now. So starting next year, 8:30 by law is the earliest we can start. So let me think about even the question before we send it out. And if it looks like, and I'm kind of sounding like the board may want to take that up as their issue to direct, then we may or may not survey.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It certainly sounds like if the board were to set floor, that's something you'd want to know before the survey went out. But I think this is right for agenda setting. It sounds like there's a lot to discuss on it, and I think it's better suited for an actual full-fledged item.
Yeah.
I think there's also, on the flip side, it might make sense if a board is going to discuss it, then having those data to find out what families think, what families prefer and why, because I think we definitely are making assumptions, right? For a lot of things we talk about how many people we've heard from that want X or that want Y, and that's obviously not representative of all of our families. So we've heard a lot of gratitude over later start times, but obviously everything has a price. So I think that if we are going to have a board item to consider putting some sort of floor or goal, then having input from families seems important. So if that survey is going to go out soon, then I think maybe including that and maybe even what's your, if you're a yes or a no, why, kind of thing, I think would be helpful to inform us.
Mr. Lee and then Mr. Dauber again.
I'm okay if Mr. Dauber finishes up before I go.
Okay, Mr. Dauber.
Yeah, to that point, and I think this was mentioned. It's probably a good idea for us to all familiarize ourselves with the American Academy of Pediatrics, perspective on this. This isn't just about, kind of preference. It's really about, what are the implications of this for, for student well-being. The other thing I want to talk about or to ask about was the homework piece. I really appreciate the fact that homework is discussed here and that it's clear the connection between homework load and student well-being. Also the fact that we have a board policy and administrative regulation. I think our student board members were in, I can't quite do the math, second grade or third grade when this policy was adopted by the board. So it's been a long time since the board gave direction on this topic, and it's problematic at best that we haven't closed the gap between policy and practice at this point. But I'm encouraged to see the level of staff support for this. I had a couple of questions about kind of what to expect in terms of activity going forward, and the timing of those. The report mentions piloting alternative homework strategies and identifying and promulgating best practices. Can you be a little bit more specific about what those pilots look like, when you expect to promulgate best practices, kind of what your action steps are?
Thank you. I think to answer your question is, we do have the panorama survey that will end in March, and then we have an action and inquiry planning session that I hope I believe will drive the discussions for what do we want to adopt and what do we want to make a part of our practice on a regular basis. On top of that, I mean, the development and the sharing of best practices across sites and through our district is at such a high level. No one is hiding anything anymore. It's share as much as possible. So that doesn't give you a great plan, and it doesn't address the timeline you're asking for, but clearly this will be a starting point, and I can discuss with our Ed Services team next steps on the timeline.
Yeah, I would appreciate getting some more specificity around next steps and timelines and targets and goals around this. It's been, like, as I say, it's been a long time, and it's been a lot of false starts on addressing the homework situation. And I think it's that's because, it's a hard problem. We don't have complete agreement, I think, among folks in the district about doing this. We're trying to disturb established practices in many ways. So I understand that it's hard and why it's hard, which makes me more interested, though, in making sure that we have clarity about what's happening. So, Mr. Dr. Austin, I think this is something for us to take up in the agenda setting, is when to bring this back to get that clarity, if that makes sense to everybody.
Certainly.
Okay. It would be helpful too. I know that there was mention of a custom module on homework for the panorama survey. I'd love to take a look at that, not to give input into it, but just to understand, what's being asked and what's different, and what we expect to learn that we don't already know from the challenge success surveys and so forth that we've had. So if staff could circulate that to board members, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for this report. I appreciate it. Mr. Lee.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mr. Lee.
I have a few comments and questions. So first of all, thank you for providing this report. I think the in-person check-ins are definitely going to be good for students. Personally, and this is just anecdotally, I appreciate when my self-mentor checks in with me one-on-one. I have great conversations with him. So I think that is something that's good to look forward to for students coming back on campus. And I also want to echo what Ms. Ladimir said about also reaching out to students who are at home. I know some of them are isolated, and I didn't think about this before, but I think it's certainly valid that, it might be more isolating to see other students come on campus. So increase outreach to those students as well would be beneficial. So a few questions. The first was about the Bell Schedule Committee. So kind of want to build off what, my predecessor, Advait Arun, did 4 years ago with trying to get more student voice on Bell Schedules Committee. So I was wondering if there was any effort to include students within this Bell Schedule Committee, or to get more student input regarding, establishing a new bell schedule.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
That's a fine answer. That's actually the perfect answer when we don't know for sure. I think that's a great question, and I believe Ms. Lawrence is heading that up. We'll pass that along to Ms. Lawrence tomorrow.
Okay. Yes, I think that would definitely be something good to incorporate, just that student voice. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and I think this falls under the scope of student wellness. So a few student board members at other school districts have been championing this initiative to establish mental health days. So essentially what that is in the same way that students might be able to to get an excused absence for a physical health reason or for, because they're sick, that there would be an opportunity for students to have an excused absence if they were dealing with something mental health related. So I know Sacramento City Unified and Poway Unified School District have moved on that to establish mental health days. I was wondering if there's something similar at PAUSD right now. Are students able to get an excused absence if they just needed a day off from school for mental health reasons?
Obviously, as you know, the state sets attendance codes. However, there's always administrative discretion, and an administrator that may know of a particular circumstance with a student can mark that student as excused while absent. That's a big discussion that I know we're all very interested in, but right now you can call in and say it's a wellness day and then have it be unexcused to where you don't suffer any of the negatives that come with an unexcused absence.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just encourage maybe some staff to look into that. Maybe look into what Sacramento City and Poway Unified School District have done on that. And the final thing I wanted to talk about, so I see that in Tier 1, one of the supports that we have for students is an SEL curriculum. So I know at Gun that's self. And I acknowledge that, this program has definitely good intentions behind it. And I can see why it's an important thing to have this social emotional learning curriculum. But I also don't want to assume that, just because we have this is kind of like a Band-Aid over the problem. And I'm sure we all recognize that. And I'm just saying this from a perspective of a senior. So self for us was implemented at Gun when I was a freshman. That was the first year. And as seniors, we have gone through this 4 years. And there definitely have been improvements over the time. I will acknowledge that. But I know that a lot of my peers have thoughts about self. They have, comments they want to make. So I don't know if this perhaps might be more of a site level thing, but if we can kind of just gather feedback from my grade, from seniors, to hear what they have to say about self after going through it for 4 years, I think that could be beneficial to help overall improve the experience and improve what we're doing in self for future years as well. So yeah, I just encourage staff to kind of reach out to students to gather that feedback. That's it for me.
Thank you. That's an excellent idea. And I know any program, if it's not being evaluated and we're not getting feedback, then how can we improve? But I appreciate that. And that's something we will absolutely do.
All right. Thank you.
Ms. Ladimirak, and then Mr. Dauber, if that's a new hand, and then Mr. Dauber will go next.
I just wanted to follow up on what Mr. Lee just said about self, because Mr. Lee, I'm the liaison at Gun, and I've talked to a lot of parents and students actually about self, and I actually mentioned to Ms. Ofek that we should think about it at some point, not immediately now, because we have a lot that we're trying to get done for the fall, but that looking at self and advisory at Pally and sort of having a working group maybe or something, just to think through the curriculum and whether there's ways that we can align it. And sort of part of that process would be definitely getting student input into what works, what hasn't worked as well, and kind of trying to mine that wisdom. So I would say certainly that's on our radar. And I appreciate you bringing it up, and definitely those of you who now have 4 years of self under your belt, that's the wisdom that we definitely need to take advantage of. So that's definitely on the radar.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Kolakowski. I don't think there are any more comments, but thank you for the report.
My pleasure. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. All right, let's move on to the next item, which is 7B, Summer School 2021 update.
Okay, and first of all, that word is perfect. This is an update. It's not done. Some big breaths. But I'm gonna have Ms. Hofek walk us through this, and Dr. Argumedo is online also if we have very specific questions. Otherwise, we're gonna get the overview from Ms. Hofek.
Great, thank you so much. So as everyone has shared, this report serves as an update to the board and the community on where we are in the planning and rollout of summer school. Progress is dependent upon COVID conditions and our ability to hire staff and community interest in the offerings. The PAUSD website has a summer school link, which is updated regularly. And for example, today we learned about a facilities project at JLS, which is where we were planning on holding middle school summer school. So ultimately we had to make some phone calls and change the location to Green Middle School, and the website is already updated. So even though our board item, which was posted last week, says JLS, it is now Green. It's posted on our website. So that website absolutely gets updated in real time. And as courses even get added in, as teachers make the decision to teach summer school, et cetera, we add to that routinely and regularly. So some of you have asked about what are the programs available. So I'll just go through the different levels. Students in elementary will rotate through sessions focusing on math or language arts, have an outdoor activities component, and have an enrichment component to their day. It will not just be one self-contained classroom. They're going to sort of model after a little bit of what the middle school has done in the past with this rotation or multiple activities available. Students will be invited to participate. The student groups that are being invited to participate are low-income students and or struggling students. Class size average is around 15 is our target. And we are in the process of working to hire some reading and math specialists to be able to do some targeted small group instruction. In addition, for students who meet the criteria or qualifications for being low income, will be invited to participate in a camp-like program with Right at School, which will be held at a separate campus. The middle school program will resemble previous years where students choose a themed pathway to explore for the summer session. It's all thematic instruction, very project oriented, and very engaging. Those components for each of those pathways include a math element, a language arts element, and then of course the thematic enrichment element, which could be any type of activity. And students generally rotate between three teachers. These offerings in the past have been offered only to students who qualified for intervention. However, this year we're opening that up to all interested students. So anyone who's interested to attend should sign up. And I think actually registration for the middle school programs went live earlier this evening. So if people who are listening are interested, they can hop online right now and sign up their student for middle school programs. The high school program is going to see the most amount of difference and change from previous years. We have had only the traditional credit recovery program, and this year students will have the opportunity to participate in an expanded set of courses that we're referring to as Kickstart classes. Depending on the course, Kickstart classes will be either credit or non-credit. And again, any student can take the Kickstart courses. Typically, credit recovery is limited to 2 courses total. However, this summer, students can take 2 courses per session for a total of 4 courses. And that can be some combination of credit recovery and or Kickstart courses. Wellness staff will be hired to be on campus, and the concept and the idea that we're pushing forward is that even within the credit recovery courses, that the courses have an instructional period and then a period of time where students get to complete work in the school day, the summer school day, rather than having homework assigned to do in addition to the very long summer school summer day. So that's a big high level overview. We do have more details if needed, but that's where we are, and it's all a work in progress and continuing to evolve over time.
Great. Thank you for the update. Board members, do we have any comments? Dr. DiBrianza?
See a pattern forming here tonight. So I heard you say at the beginning, you know, some of it is dependent on actually finding people to hire. And in my mind, I'm guessing after the year we have had, that'll probably be a challenge in some ways, right? That I think everyone's exhausted, teachers need a break. A lot of whom I normally teach in summer school might say like, I just can't. So it'll be interesting to see who you guys find. And I wish you well on that. Just to clarify, it's all in person, right? No one's signing up to do Zoom summer school.
So the only courses that are online are living skills and economics.
Okay.
And that actually allows more spaces or more opportunities in the in-person program.
I feel like I heard, it was last summer, people were very happy with living skills on that last summer. They thought that teacher did a fantastic job with managing it all. So that's great. And signups have already started for summer school, right? I feel like that went out last week.
Yeah, there's it's being rolled out in phases, yes, but signups have started for middle school and some of the high school signups as well.
If someone out there in TV land isn't sure where to sign up for it, I believe it's on our Pally page. I mean,
It's on our
district page.
PAUSD website, and there's a link to summer school.
Okay.
And if you have any questions, email Judy Argumedo, jargumedo@pausd.org.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Ladimirak?
I think I have a very quick question. So for middle school, it's the only place where there isn't really like invitations for struggling students, right? They're kind of all the courses are open for everybody. And I guess, which sounds great. I guess my question is just if enrichment is kind of embedded in the offerings, and should families, I think families are kind of used to, especially I would think for rising sixth graders, families are kind of used to getting letters or told that their kid needs to go to summer school, or they suggest that their kid goes to summer school, right? So should we give families the advice of just reaching out to your teacher if you're not sure? I'm just thinking like sixth or seventh grade, you may kind of know your kid's struggling, but it would be nice to sort of get a clear answer. Yes, we suggest your kid.
Well, I
take
think
summer school
a
and-
first step for a middle school parent, or yes, for a fifth grade parent,
Right.
you know, of a rising sixth grader, but if for existing and current middle school students, they can also reach out to their counselor.
Okay.
And seek support that way. And, you know, we can look into suggesting to those who might benefit from it to send a note home.
I mean,
So
I think
we can work on that.
parents probably know, especially middle school. I think sometimes it's harder to tell in elementary school just because of the way the progress reports are, but in middle school, I think it's probably pretty obvious if your kids' grades are really struggling, but that's good to know. So they can reach out to the counselor to
Yeah.
ask. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I jump in?
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
ahead.
So we are also working with the SAFE specialists. So the fifth graders are gonna get a call from the school site specialist at all the elementaries and help them register for targeted students. They have a list. And if they can't do it on the website, the SAFE specialists are gonna like register on the Google form for them. And we also have paper registrations available at the district. So we did kind of think that, I just didn't put that in the update. Sorry, Sharon.
Perfect, Judy. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the update. Mr. Dauber?
Thank you, Mr. Drop. I wanted to ask a bit about the, it looks like, and I know you mentioned this, but it looks like the number of seats that we have available is smaller than the number of students we think could benefit from these programs. Is that right?
So yes, the district did look at the NWEA and which is the math assessment, and then the 2 reading assessments, and anybody who was below benchmark, even if they were slightly below, we put them as eligible. And that was 959 students, but then we sent the list to the site so they could give input. We could have multiple measures to the highest priority. So also, if parents do not want to come, and I'm sure that that's going to happen through travel, we're going to be doing rolling invitations. So somebody could get an invitation a little bit later if they're just slightly below benchmark. So we're hoping to service many students.
And the constraint on capacity is coming from physical capacity or funding or difficulty in getting
physical capacity. Actually, to talk about Ms. Brianza's teachers, we do have a lot of teachers who have signed up, and we're sending out contracts. I think we have almost all positions filled. Elementary, we have all positions filled, and it's the constraints are the sites, because I think some of the rooms have different capacity.
So help me to understand. So 420, maybe, so if I add this up, it's 790 seats needed. Is that right? But presumably we have, so I'm adding up 460 and seats available for the intervention and 230 for the enrichment. Is that adds up to 790?
That doesn't include the special ed, ESY, extended school year, which is also going to be at Duveneck and Fair Meadows. So they're taking up some of the classrooms, but we didn't include that number.
Got it. So but obviously we're going to be having a lot more elementary students than that in the fall, right? So hopefully. So is it that we are not using all of our sites, or that it's a social distancing issue? We're fully utilizing all of our elementary sites, but there's a social distancing issue. I'm just trying to understand what
If I can jump in here for just a minute, I think we're working with room capacity at the moment, and that's maybe I was too vague when I referred to COVID conditions. As we change and move through different colors, I'll say, in the state's designation, those conditions may change, but at the moment we're planning for roughly 15 students in a classroom. And that's in alignment with the way that the county guidelines are communicated to us, and the criteria for ventilation, et cetera. So I think that's our number one constraint.
And so we just don't have enough rooms at 15 students? We do, right? Because we have 12 elementary schools, and I'm doing the math, and it's more than. So if I'm trying to understand because obviously there's unmet need here, right? At least as we see it. And so if the constraint is physical locations, that seems like we can overcome it fairly easily. So can you help me understand what I'm missing something?
Well, we have 2 sites with 2 summer school administrations with 2 sets of classrooms. I mean, if the board wants us to add a site, we would have to add administration, add a site, add staffing, all that. It's fine, but that's not where we're functioning off of 2 sites with 2 administrative teams at the moment.
Well, I heard the board. The only thing I've heard from the board about summer school is whatever we need to do, we'll do, because we want to meet we want to mitigate the learning loss that we expect has happened as a consequence, particularly for our least advantaged students. So if it's a question of expanding expenditures on staff and administration, I would certainly be completely supportive of doing that. I don't think there's any higher priority than trying to, get our kids back into a position where they can, not suffer that kind of learning loss. And I see summer school as a really important intervention for that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, today, as we said, was the first update. And what I'm hearing is there's some question about the restriction. Are they self-imposed, or are they through some other mechanism? So why don't we just make the next update more about the restrictions and things that we were able to mitigate, or things that we think either we can't or it doesn't add enough benefit to touch it. That could be in our next update, if that makes sense.
I mean, or if you could go bigger, I'd much rather hear about how you were able to go bigger than how you couldn't go bigger. That would be a happier update. So, I mean, I'm sure we should all share the same goal, and so what I definitely don't want is staff to think, oh well, you know, there's a limit to what board will do, or the money that we can spend, or something like that. You should go until you hear a no from us, I would say, rather than impose any constraints before that. I think this is. I mean, I'd be happy to hear my colleagues chime in on this, but that's my sense.
Mr. Collins and then Dr. DiBrianza.
I just want to reiterate what Mr. Dauber just said. Why we were constrained to 2 sites, I really can't understand. We have very ample funding available for this, and the need is as dire as it has ever been. So why we would, I can't think of what the constraint would be that would have us turn kids away who are needful and desirous to get more school, in-person school after a year of not having it. So I hope you come back with great news. We can find a way to open school number 3 or school number 4.
We do have 3 schools open.
School number 4, school number 5. Thank you. But I think this is a go big situation, and I would much rather have, gosh, we have to spend an extra, several $100,000 in order to go bigger. Is that okay? Rather than, let me tell you all the reasons we can't do it. So I'm very supportive of doing whatever we can to accommodate all kids who are needful and desirous.
Thank you, Dr. DiBrianza.
Thanks. I mean, I'm interested in when you put the word out there for signups, if you see if there's there's a long wait list, then hey, let's talk about expanding it. If there's not, this probably isn't significant. So I think some data will help us decide what the next step will be. My question had to do with high school and the high school summer school starting at 8:15. And I'm curious about that choice after such a fantastic year of not starting anywhere near 8:15. I mean, elementary, maybe they tend not to sleep late, but high school?
I'd like to comment on that, but I have no comment.
I can comment on
for that.
Flexibility there?
We're going to find out right now.
Dr. Argumedo has a response.
Yes. So we did that to really try to maximize credit recovery. In the past, they've offered only 2 for the session. And when we did a look at some of the students, they were missing like 3 or 4. So to be able to get in all the minutes and offer 2 credit recovery sessions, 2 credit recovery classes in 1 session, we did have to go, but we definitely can adjust 15 minutes later. So they start at 8:30. So that's something that we can change.
Well, I definitely think that, since the state has said we really don't want school in general to start earlier than 8:30. But I'm wondering, do we have like an end time that we have to be done by? Like why can't we just start it at 9 and go to 4 or something? Is that?
Well, I think there's an appeal. I mean, this is just an opinion and not, but I think there's an appeal to having some time in the day in summer school to prepare and plan for the next day from the teacher side. And we want to make sure we have teachers signed up, but I'll let Dr. Argumedo also add in. She's had conversations with folks.
Right. So that was, the teachers did want to kind of stop before 4. So they're going to go a little bit later. And one of the reasons we did have it to that time is because the living skills class starts, the mandatory Zooms are going to be in the evening. And so if students wanted to take the credit recovery and then go to their living skills class, they were going to be able to do so.
Oh, all right. As long as there are reasons to do it, but yeah, if we could push it back a little bit, later's better.
Yeah, 15 minutes, we can push that back.
All right. Mr. Dauber, is your hand still up, or you have additional?
I just, on the, well, later is better. 9 is better than 8:30. I think the story of school start times is going to be about how, there's some specific reason, teacher preferences, sports schedules and so forth, that is gonna seem more pressing than this general issue of student health. It's hard to observe, it's statistics, et cetera. So we're gonna have to, keep our eye on the ball and be willing to say, no, really, we mean this on a lot of these points, and this is one of them. So I definitely think later is better. On the summer school, this is a topic that we can bring to the agenda setting committee. I would expect to see this back on, my preference would be to see this back on the next agenda and to try to make some progress towards getting more capacity in place. So that's what I hope to see.
Ms. Ladimirak?
Yeah, I had a similar, well, I guess it's a comment and question to Ms. DiBrienza. So when we say right now 959 eligible students, and that's based on the benchmark assessment, is that's kids that we've already identified right now, but we haven't asked. I mean, we would love that all those kids would come to summer school, obviously, but just based in past years, that's not at all the case, right? Okay.
Yes, we prioritize them, and the school also has a say in prioritizing based on multiple factors.
But the families don't all choose to come.
No, and I anticipate that will happen, and then we will go to the next on the list and see if they all want to come back, let's open more schools.
Okay, all right. So hopefully we can, before we decide if we're going to hire a bunch more people and open another school, we would know if we needed to do that. So I get that the timing's sort of all fluid, but yeah, I'm hoping we can, this may not even be necessary.
Okay. Mr. Dauber, just to confirm, hand still up from last time?
I'm lowering it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so, well, it's great this was on for a report. I think this is part of the process. I will just say that I agree with all of my colleagues in the following ways, such that with my input, I heard the board ask for these things. One, the next time this comes up, the board would like to see data as to whether or not there is a need to expand. Two, if so, the board would like to explore that option of expansion to additional facilities to support the need. And three, any restrictions, if any, that would prevent us from expanding to additional facilities. And as Mr. Dauber said, we will discuss this in agenda setting and hopefully have this on at the next meeting. All right, moving on to our last staff report. Colleagues, we could have a break now. My preference would be that we sort of power through, but I'll leave it to the room. Okay, I heard some mumblings of power through and some noddings of heads. So let's keep going, and we'll move on to our school reopening progress report.
All right, I'm handling that item tonight. It's a 35-minute presentation. Just joking. It's going to take us about 2 minutes here. So many of the things I was going to talk about came up during the meeting. So with Kevin Gordon's explanation of the funding pieces, we really don't need to speak to that now, absent to say that we're in great shape. I think every superintendent in our region would trade seats if they could, because we have already qualified for all the funding that's made available. Also, something that is easy to lose sight of is, as of today, not only are we open for in-person instruction grades TK through 12, that makes us the only comprehensive school district in our region open for TK through 12. And it's easy to take that for granted. But it's nice. When I was walking around recently on some campuses the day before we came back, so yesterday, Monday, walking around high school campuses, and I was able to talk to quite a few teachers that, they all said it differently, but I think they were surprised and happy with the level of preparation from everyone who puts things in place. Anywhere from our custodians and our safety crews that go through to make sure the rooms are clean, but then additionally that they're spaced properly. I asked one teacher about the configuration of her class desk, and she said that they were instructed that if your desk were set up with a certain spacing, not to touch them, which is great. But then she went on to tell me how much she appreciated the obvious effort that went into it. So, you know, those are all really great things. We picked up another over 1,000 students today, and the same will be true when the next group comes back. We had estimated about 30% of our high school students would come back. Remember, that's a number that I've shared with you many times. And today we had about 30% of our kids that came back. So we're not surprised by that number. The next projection I would make is that number will go up and down. There'll be times I expect it to go up within the next couple of weeks. And then we should expect some times when it dips a little bit. And that's fine, because when Mr. Klein came over to see me, the principal from Pally today, I did not ask him about what kids learned in their math class today. I did ask him, how did lunch go? And he said, it was beautiful. The students were out there, they were together, they were interacting, that it was fun and starting to feel like the Pally that he had heard about when he accepted the position here. Got to remember what our primary goal was. Our primary goal was to get people back, get our teachers back, get them in a rhythm, get them with their colleagues, get students back, and make this, you know, a degree of pilot, which is, by the way, a pilot is not an experiment. A pilot is a pilot. We feel really good about our safety measures. So to all those things, it's been a winner. Lastly, and this is speaking to the future, you know, we do have our reopening meetings coming up with PAEA and CSEA. I'd like to thank our PTA. I sent the draft survey to PTA in advance, and they had quite a few eyes on it, gave us some really great suggestions and tweaks on the survey. And thank you for everyone who sent back that feedback. You'll see it reflected in the survey, I can assure you. So with that, you know, it's been a great experience to get students back. I know some people are really emotional about it. You know, put me in that column. It's really nice to hear schools again and to see the obvious interactions that are exactly what we were shooting for. I can take any questions on anything specific that you would like.
All right, thank you, Dr. Austin. We do have 3 public comments on this. First is Meb Steiner, CSEA President, followed by Rebecca Eisenberg, and then Jeremy Ehrman.
Good evening. This is Meb Steiner. You'll see my actual full name flashed on the screen there. I am speaking tonight just to sort of emphasize a few things. The first is I want to emphasize the shared goal that I think we as a community have had. And I bring attention to the correspondence section here of the agenda, where I asked for the pathway to bringing students back called classes that was created by education labor organizations, including CSEA and CTA. And if you just read the first page of the 9 pages, the introduction, it talks about how classified employees and teachers want nothing more than to be back in our physical classrooms and be with our kids, and in-person learning being priceless, and how important schools are for our communities, the challenges we've all faced together, and the work that has been done, and continued vigilance we need to have as we continue our fight against COVID. So I just want to bring our attention to this common ground that we have. And I also want to reference the incredible work of classified staff that have helped in prepping our schools to be ready. And I could not be happier about the announcement of our on-site vaccines. CSEA pushed very hard for that, as well as did teacher groups, and for continued mitigation and all of the monies that are going to be coming towards that and helping mitigate the learning changes, I will say, rather than loss. Kids have learned differently, but to mitigate those. I also want to call attention to the retirements. And I call attention to that because we will be meeting about our return in fall and planning for that. And we will not have these amazing folks. So I urge people to take a look at the certificated personnel items and classified personnel items in the consent calendar, consent agenda items. There are folks with 20 plus, 30 plus years of experience, folks we will desperately miss and who've given so much of their time. And it doesn't end with 30 plus. Oddly, my daughter was speaking about Miss Yount, her teacher at Fletcher, and who's now at Fletcher. Miss Yount has taught for 50 years, and that's just incredible. And I hope that we find a way to also honor our retirees this year as we plan the many activities for our seniors and other students as well. So I look forward to creative solutions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rebecca Eisenberg, followed by Jeremy Ehrman.
Hi there. Thanks for having me back. I need to respond to something that Superintendent Austin said. He said that 30% of high schoolers returned, but that is completely as in 180 degrees opposite to what every single anecdotal evidence, all the statements being made while I type all throughout Facebook and in other forums and in group emails of parents. No student has reported even ever as many as a third of the other students there in the class. In fact, every single so far description, with the exception of one outdoor choir class where there were 11, I think out of like 50 students in attendance, it has been under 5 students there. And this is at Pally. So no, it's not 30%. And I've got to say, it's getting very frustrating to hear a version of reality that is being stated by the superintendent that is completely at odds with the reality that human beings are actually experiencing. And that is why I again urge you to stop silencing the community. Second, I want to express my appreciation for CSEA, the previous speaker, as well as the PAEA. And I too noticed the unusually large number of retirements. I meant to sign up, about the consent decree because I pulled that as a note. And my note I was going to say was that my first thought in reading that list was that the district, it looks like the district decided to fire the most senior teachers in violation of the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, ADA, in order to save money. And again, I need to repeat that from the student's point of view, there is nothing more important than the teachers. And letting go so many teachers in order to save money, if that's the case, and again, this is undeniably the perception, it's just a terrible idea. It's just the worst idea. And it further chisels away the opportunity for Palo Alto to return to the status it used to have as one of the best school districts. Last thing I want to say, and again in relationship to the teachers, is that there's a lot of chatter online, which I'm sure you all are going to point out to be problematic, and you're going to start putting pressure on forum moderators to censor this. But the word is out that a lot of students don't want to return to school for a bunch of reasons. One of them including the fact that they feel that the teachers were not treated fairly, that they feel like the teachers were excluded from this process and strong-armed. That was someone's word. So think about this.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Jeremy Ehrman.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Listening to the comments throughout the night and the discussions about the reopening, I am struck by how abstract it is at times. We've heard a lot about numbers of students returning, numbers of cohorts, numbers of schools that are open. I would really like to hear more specifically about what the actual structure of the reopened program is. What classes are happening, what classes aren't happening, what are the experiences that are being created for people to have, and what are people not experiencing? Because as I think mentioned, the goal, of course, is that the reopened schools should provide a learning experience that students don't get with the distance learning, but this still is a very partial reopening. So I really would like to see more details about what is being offered and what's not being offered so that the detractions of this are also clear. A lot of this information does not appear to be on the website as well. So I just think some of these details would really aid the conversation in knowing what are the actual experiences that are being prepared for students and teachers, and then what do they think of them, as opposed to just saying, well, we reopened, it's great. The details feel like they're missing. So that's my opinion. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. All right, we have some time for board comments. Before we start, I would like to ask Dr. Austin for some clarification. I think that if we have accusations of falsehoods, I take that very, very seriously. And I don't think that's well taken if in fact that's not true. So Dr. Austin, I would like clarification on those numbers, please.
Yeah, two things. First of all, retirement incentive is greeted with thank you. So those aren't anyone getting fired. Those are people that received a full year's salary to retire at this stage of their career. And of course, they're on the that end of the career. For experience, you have to qualify for the incentive. That's regulation through PARS. So I really don't want anyone to think anyone was fired. Those were incentives which were accepted with great gratitude. Next, I didn't think we needed to be this specific, but apparently we do. So Gunn High School had 242 students in attendance today, Pally 261, Fletcher 141, Green 310, JLS 326. So before someone does the math and says, well, that's not a third, of course it isn't. It's a third, 26% out of the eligible students to return on any given day. Because again, the schools were split into half. That also does not include the 470 student athletes who show up for their cohorts, PAUSD Plus, which is still running, and students that were there for other reasons. So yeah, absolutely stand by the numbers, and those come out of our attendance system. So.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. Board colleagues, do we have any comments or questions? Ms. Ladimirak?
I just wanted to say that in the past week, I've heard from lots of sixth grade families and students. And then today I have heard from even more other secondary students and parents. And the feedback I have received is unanimously positive, and not only positive, but effusively so. And my phone frequently blows up with unhappy people. So I will tell you the fact that I've only heard from happy ones today, and really incredibly happy. I mean, quotes that are just like, I haven't seen my kid smile this much in a year. Or he came home and couldn't stop talking at dinner, and usually he never says anything. So, I mean, really, I just want to give you guys a huge thank you to everyone in the district office, to our facilities people, and particularly to our principals and our teachers and our staff at our secondary schools. Just bravo. I mean, you guys really just knocked it out of the park. And honestly, I think it was to be expected given how incredibly successful our elementary schools have been. But it still really deserves just such a huge congratulations and thank you. And sometimes I think one of the real benefits of being a parent on the board is that you get the kind of real-time feedback, which sometimes is frustrating and you don't always want it. But when it's a day like this and everybody's happy and my phone won't stop, I get to bring that to you guys who don't maybe get to hear it as much. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. DiBrianza.
I mean, similar. I think there were a lot of very happy people this week, today. Interestingly, I heard from several parents of sixth graders last week who said, my kid came home from school and fell asleep, right? Like you're a 5-year-old again, right? And I think it really speaks to the amount of energy it takes to interact with people during the day. And we all had a big break from that. And it's tiring to re-engage in the world. So I think keeping that in mind and making sure we start slowly and with a lot of the supports and things that have been embedded into the schools. So yes, real-time updates today too. A few questions from some parents saying, hey, my kid's teacher wasn't in the room. And I think that you had said there were going to be a handful of teachers that have a medical reason or why they won't be there, but majority are back in person, right?
Yeah, we can get you exact numbers later, but there's some that are, they've gone through the interactive process or in it that may return shortly, but there are a handful at all of our schools.
Okay, but if someone had like one or two teachers today, that's odd. That's, the majority are here, right?
Yeah, the overwhelming majority are here, and it is possible to have, just through the luck of the draw, had two that weren't on a schedule.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for all the work that all of our teachers and all of our classified staff and all of our admin have just, I mean, been doing all year, but especially leading up to this chance for anyone who needs or wants to come back to come back to campus. So thank you. Look forward to seeing it continue tomorrow and then for the other kids on Thursday, Friday.
Mr. Dauber?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to add my thanks to the teaching staff and classified staff, and I appreciated hearing from Meb Steiner from CSEA, and I also appreciate the collaboration of our other bargaining units, including PAEA, with the reopening. I also appreciate the work that's been done to enable our school staff to be vaccinated. I think that's a great step forward, and I think it is substantively important to do that. It also just speaks to the support of the community at both the local level and the state level for our school staff. So I want to add my support to that as well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yeah, I think a student perspective would also be beneficial here. I will say that from the people that I've heard coming back today, there is a lot of excitement coming back to school. And I know people are excited to see their teachers for the first time. And as a student myself, I will be coming back to campus on Thursday and Friday, and I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement with students coming back to school. And to be fair as well, there are still students who are hesitant. There's still students who are concerned, but I think as we see how the reopening plan unfolds in the weeks to come, some of those hesitations might be assuaged. And also, there's still some kinks to work out. Teachers are still getting used to teaching in this new format. And I've heard those comments from my teachers today, certainly, with trying to figure all that out. So yeah, I just wanted to briefly talk about that. And I'm sure Maida has more to add.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Atla?
Honestly, it's pretty similar at Pali too to what Thomas just mentioned going on at Gunn. From the classmates, these 2 days are my days, but I was unable to go today, and I will probably be heading back to school tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to it. And most of my friends and classmates that I've spoken to have enjoyed it. I don't know a lot in my personal friend group, but I've been talking to classmates. Other than small logistical details like the desk not being big enough to house both notebooks and a computer and other small, more like site level decisions like that, the people who have gone back have enjoyed it. And like Thomas said, not all of my contacts have decided to go back yet. A lot of them are waiting until April, until more people have decided to come back and see how it's like for them. And more people are waiting for their friends to come back too, so they're not alone at lunch. And some people just have some reservations about this new plan. But yeah, that's what it's going on. That's what's going on at Pali.
All right, thank you. Yeah, a gargantuan task and a real credit to staff and Dr. Austin for really working this through and implementing, and to all our staff, because it's pretty amazing what we've done, and really we can see it when we talk to the students. I visited few school sites, several classrooms with Dr. Austin earlier this week, and it was a real joy to talk to teachers. And to see the students who are all just so excited to be back in person. So really great, fantastic job. Okay, with that, we've concluded our reports, and we're gonna move on to information items. We're not gonna go through each of these, so board members, if you have a comment on an information item, you can raise your hand, but let's first take public comment. We do have one public comment, and that is on item 8A, the Equity Impact Report, and that is Rebecca Eisenberg. Ms. Eisenberg, you have 3 minutes.
Awesome. Now, this is actually the main reason I'm here. I heard, and if any of you were at the city council meeting last night, but I'm guessing you weren't, even though I urged you to go because Castilleja's development is going to greatly harm the school district. But anyway, I heard that tomorrow the city of Palo Alto, via I think the police department, are taking action against the RVs that house families, many of whom have children that attend Palo Alto public schools, including, from what I was told, several at Pali. And the word on the street is that these cars are possibly going to be towed, almost certainly ticketed. When many speakers object to this at the school board meeting, the city manager pointed, to, and so, Mr. Austin, it's not just you that I call out the inaccuracies. The city manager of Palo Alto pointed to a non-existent state law that he claimed requires the city of Palo Alto to tow and ticket RV parkers, which we know just is not true at all. In fact, if anything, it's the opposite. But anyway, I'm wondering if I wanted to speak about that with equity, because we have this swiftly growing population of home insecure and unhoused public school families who are falling between the cracks. Palo Alto doesn't do a good job. The city does not do anywhere close to an adequate job of keeping track of the number of unhoused families we have here. It looks like they're not even trying. And I'm not saying it's their responsibility. Well, actually, it is their responsibility. I'm not saying it's your responsibility, although maybe it is too. I just really am hoping that you all will keep an eye on this, because a lot of people have been forced to move into their cars during this pandemic, despite legal protections for tenants. As you know, Palo Alto, or you should know, Palo Alto is the only city in the region of our size that has zero shelter beds for the homeless population. And these are children that we just need to take care of, if not for legal reasons, for moral reasons. So I just really hope someone tonight could speak to that, because this has to do with equity.
Thank you. And as always, feel free to email your comments to board@pausd.org. Board colleagues, on information items, if there are any you would like to speak to, please go ahead and raise your hand either in person or in Zoom. All right, Dr. DeBrienza.
There's a couple of them here. For the equity information item, thank you. You mentioned a restorative practices design team. And I'm actually curious, like, do you see this as being like one of the subcommittees of the equity committee? Or do you see it, it feels like it would fall under that. So I guess I'm just wondering if you guys already have a sense of where that would be. And
Yeah, it obviously falls under the equity umbrella. So how we formulate the subcommittees might require a little more conversation, but this is certainly a group of staff members that will be convening and coming together to look specifically at what the needs are at their individual site as well.
in the nice little pamphlet you attached to it, as I look through, it talks about at the beginning, determining readiness for implementation of this. And I'm wondering, is there anything that you feel, and maybe this is committee work to do, but is there anything you feel that you need to be ready to implement? Does the board need to be, giving you resources or help in making sure that we're in a position where we can do this successfully?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest challenge with this type of initiative is buy-in across the board. So Our work is really about how are we shifting mindsets for our staff to think about discipline in a different way. So the design team will be, once we kind of get a plan from the design team, we'll have a better idea of what additional resources are needed. We are already identifying resources with our consultant who's going to be providing her expertise to come support our team to develop a plan.
Great, thank you. Should I, let's pass to other people and come back to.
All right, any other comments on this? Okay. Dr. DeBrienza?
One question about the college career indicator. Love seeing these expanded offerings and increasing the number of students completing it. I'm wondering about the effort to make sure that there's a range of representation in these programs. I think that part of the reason that this was pushed by the state, right, was to increase representation and opportunities for students. Is there explicit work we're doing in trying to get that representation?
There is, and there are conditions for continued funding that relate back to enrollment and diversification of student groups participating in programs.
Great. Okay. Was it?
All right. I see no other comments from my colleagues. And with that, let's move on to board operations. Colleagues, any board operations? Ms. Latimira?
Well, I just wanted to say I am ready to get to work on the equity committee. I'm really looking forward to scheduling our first meeting and figuring out what these subcommittees are. And I'm excited to be serving with you, Mr. Darb, so thank you. I mean, 2 lawyers on the committee, what could go wrong? It's gonna be great. But really, also just all jokes aside, I feel that I would be remiss if I did not take the opportunity to recognize and express my gratitude to Ms. DeBrienda for really being the standard bearer for systemic equity work for the past 4 years. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, you've made sure to keep pushing and moving the conversation forward. So thank you for moving the needle. And Mr. Darp and I will try to do you proud.
Thank you. I'm really excited about that. I think there's a lot of potential here with this board equity committee and all the subcommittee work, and I look forward to seeing what you guys bring forward in the coming months. I think the only thing that I've got going on, besides stopping by Pally during the 9th grade orientation, which was awesome and very loud and festive. But tomorrow morning, I don't know, I think I'm going with Ms. Latimira to, there's a Barron Park 3rd grade classroom that we're going to join. There are some guest speakers coming from the Black Panther Party, and we're going to listen to those. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say. That's it.
Yeah, I'll add to that. He sent us a list of the questions from the 3rd graders. It's fantastic. I can't wait.
All right. Colleagues, anything? I was, to add to that, I was also invited. I was looking forward to going, but I decided that to avoid any potential Brown Act issues and allow the board members who are attending to engage to the fullest, I would bow out and wait to hear a full report at the next board meeting on that. All right. Any other board operations, colleagues? Okay, seeing none, let us go ahead and adjourn this meeting. We will see you next time.